So welcome everyone to this webinar on hiring an executive director and/or CFO. And I am Spencer Brigham, the training and events administrator for AFOA Canada. And just before we begin, I'd like to open with a land acknowledgement. So I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the First Nations. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples, whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. We honor the traditional lands and homelands of Indigenous peoples and communities across Canada, including First Nations, Inuit, and Métis living both on and off reserve in rural and urban communities. And just a bit about myself, I am from Walpole Island First Nation in Ontario, also known as Bekedrona. And with that, I'll pass it over to the President and CEO of AFOA Canada, Terry Goodtrek.
Well, welcome. Thank you very much, Spencer, and welcome to everyone here today. This is a really interesting webinar that we're covering here today. There's many times people have asked me this question about, hiring a CFO, and I think as communities kind of grow in their own source revenues, it's becoming something to give thought to is what the type of person that you want and what are those functions that are you providing. In the past, I've had a community sort of, as an example, a community that came forward to me and said, hey, look, we're trying to hire a CFO. Could you provide us some advice on that? And the first thing I would ask them was, well, what are you paying, right? So they tell me, right, a certain amount. And then the next question I would ask is, well, what are the revenues of this community, right? And there would always be this mismatch, what I would call it, between the amount of revenues and responsibilities that you're asking of this position versus what you're paying the position. And so I would say, well, you're going to get what you pay for, right? Because you've got to make sure that you pay this individual adequately to what the market sort of dictates, I guess you could say. This individual is very much a member of the management team and should be seen as that in that vein. It was there are times when they're more seen as you hire them as a manager, but yet kind of treat them more as a clerk, and that's not the intent here. The CFO is a member of the management team and should be providing strategic advice to not only the financial operations but risk. What is the risk to the organization? What is the future planning requirement going forward? And they're a valuable resource in this. So many communities, when they ask this question, the first thing you want to have to find out is not only what does the person do, but what is the future that you're going to be asking of this person, especially as communities move more into economic and social prosperity, in particular the own source revenues that go along with it, and what type of skill sets do you require. I'm very happy that our speaker here today is Brenda LaRose. She's been certainly in this field for many decades, and certainly one of the leading sort of professionals in this area. And I know on many engagements that we've had previously in the number of organizations that worked previously, I've certainly called on Brenda's expertise to find us individuals and provide guidance to our organization. So I'm really happy that Brenda is able to deliver this webinar here today. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Brenda, and thank you very much for agreeing to do this presentation. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Terry, and thank you, Spencer. I'm actually very excited to be here with you today and share any knowledge and experience that I've had over my 35 years in recruitment, staffing, and the last 25 in executive search. I want to welcome everybody. I hope that you get some good ideas from this, and I'm always open to anybody that wants to ask any questions at the end. If we have time, I'm sure we're going to, but also, after, if something comes to your mind and you need to reach out, please don't hesitate. I'm here. So I'm a Métis woman, born in Manitoba, raised in Regina, in the north central neighborhood of Regina, and I've lived and I've worked across Canada, from Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. I'm now living and working in Ottawa on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. And so anyway, I'm again excited to be here with you. And I just want to mention before we start that I've had a bad cough for about a week and a half. If I start coughing, it's not COVID, but I might need to take a drink or get a throat lozenge. So we'll get started. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. Spencer, everything look good?
Yep, we can see your presentation. Yep.
Okay, great. So we'll jump into it. So for the agenda today, I've got 11 different items, and this is really in the order of what you need to know, sort of step by step in the process of recruiting and hiring and retaining talent. Okay, so the current labor market in Canada is more challenging than it's been, ever before. And right now in Canada, we have a shortage of skilled talent. So the toughest, just if there's anybody on the video from Atlantic, Ontario and BC are the toughest markets right now. And this has really got a lot to do with the demographics of the different ages. So we're in a shortage of skilled professionals for any kind of management roles, and it's going to be at least a decade before it gets better. I'm on the Canadian Chamber of Commerce board, on the executive committee of the board. And before COVID, we were actually talking about this, and we had identified a couple of years before from medium, especially the medium small business, SMEs, they call it, small to medium businesses, that this is one of their major concerns. So, we've got a huge shortage, so it's going to be tougher than ever before. We're actually at about a 5% unemployment rate in Canada, just over 5.1, 5.2, 5.3 in different provinces. And at that level, once you hit 5%, that's basically no unemployment, because the people that you want to hire or that are applying even, might not be qualified, or they really just don't really want to work, or they think of a reason not to stay very long. So what are some of the things that you can do? Well, okay, so baby boomers are retiring. I'm a baby boomer. Those are born between 1946 and 1964. And they can work longer than they have in the past, as long as they have their faculties and their health. But they're leaving the workforce. The Gen Xers are 1965 to 1980. And there's a least amount of the Gen Xers. So that's right after the baby boomers. Those would be your natural managers. And so, there's not as many of those. Millennials are 1981 to 1996. And they're right now currently 26 to 41 years old. Spencer's probably in that group. And right now they make up almost 51% of our workforce. So they're a little bit younger. So what are some people doing? Well, they're hiring younger, less qualified, and also providing training and development for them. You can also look at hiring baby boomers to come back after they're retired or at the end of their careers to spend 2 to 3 years succession planning and training and mentoring your staff and getting their expertise if they're willing and you're willing to do that. And also we're going to be looking to new Canadians that are skilled. The costs of recruiting are typically about 50 to 100% of an individual's salary, which when you think about it, that's significant. So if you're turning over people all the time, it's costing you a lot of money, and time is included in that too. with our search firm, which was Higgins Executive Search, and I sold the company to Leaders International 5 years ago, we average on any search spend about 225 hours. And that's an average search. That's one that's not overly challenging. Okay, so let's go back. Hold on here. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so let's go back to the job description. So hiring an individual who's a bad fit is a totally wrong decision, because they're not going to reach their optimum performance. They're probably not going to be happy. They're not going to be fully engaged in the work that they're doing, and they're going to likely leave fairly quickly. So your job description is your roadmap. It needs to be accurate and up to date. So if it's not accurate, if things have changed, you've got to get it current and up to date. And it's based upon the role and the responsibility and the strategic plan as well. What's realistic has to be involved in that. So it's not your wish list. And the 4 to 5 key duties from this, and the priorities will make up the first year performance appraisal. So you can actually take some of the key duties and priorities for your performance appraisal. You might as well do that so that they know what's expected, and let them know in the start, once they're hired in the role, these are the 4 to 5 things, and you should probably even rank them. These are the top 2, and this is the 3rd, this is the 4th, and this is how, and get them to agree upon that in advance. So you got to include who they report to, who they supervise or manage. I'm not going to go through everything. You can read it. Knowledge, skills, and abilities. And this is going to determine if it's a controller, a director of finance, similar to controller, a little bit more strategic, or high-level chief financial officer, because it's not all the same. It's not a one-size-fits-all. The various communities and organizations need different levels of expertise and skills. And it really depends upon, the size of the organization, the budget, and if you have your own source revenues. So with the controller, those are, really, running the accounting function. They have the accounting staff reporting directly to them. They're still sitting at the management table, like Terry told you. They're part of the management team. They need to be. But predominantly, maybe it's managing contribution agreements, accounting, and reporting. And that's when you can go into a director of finance, depending again how large the budget, and also chief financial officer. These are around own source revenue. So again, if you've got other revenue, then you want to probably call it something different, because the other thing about the job description and the title is if you call it the wrong thing, you're not going to attract the right people. If people are already in a director of finance role, they're not going to step back and go into a controller role. Likely not. Or if they're a CFO, they're not going to step back and be a director of finance or a controller. So you're limiting your, you've got to be careful how you also title it. Okay, so compensation, Terry talked about this. It must be competitive. And what is it competitive with? It must be competitive with Main Street. And that depends upon the sector that you're in. So compare it to other, First Nations or Indigenous organization, as well as geographically, and for, the role that they're actually doing. So you've got to remember the current labor market challenges. No one's going to take less money. And most people that you recruit expect, especially in this market, 10 to 15% increase, but they usually don't leave for the same amount of money as well. Depending upon if it's a community, First Nations community, housing and relocation assistance is the norm, and they need adequate housing. If they are driving into the community, it can't be from a long distance away. I mean, it's just, it's going to be very difficult for people to do that. And also the pension and the benefits that you offer. And the other thing is, the other thing that comes into play is membership fees for associations, for their CPA associations, AFOA associations, because once they have their designations, they have to have professional development every year to maintain that. And so that's also included, it's all the finance and accounting team usually is included in their compensation. So it has to be competitive. It should be with mainstream, especially if you're trying to attract people into the role. Now, remembering I'm Métis, I don't, for some of you that qualify for tax exempt, I advocate from this for the last 35 years. But just because you're First Nations and the organization community is paying, or the company or organization is paying tax exempt, it doesn't mean that they get paid lower. It should be competitive with mainstream. And then if it's tax exempt, then that's, again, it's a bonus. It's part of the role. So I firmly believe that. Everybody can have different opinions, but that's my thoughts. Okay, so job profile and posting. You've got to make sure it sounds like a great opportunity if you're putting together a posting and a profile. So you got to sell the benefits of the role, maybe the community, if it's a beautiful community, maybe the leadership, if they've got great reputations. You've got to sizzle it, is what I say. The contact information for someone to respond if someone has questions should be on there. And these days of saying only those qualified will be notified doesn't work. There could be people that, well, potentially might be interested. They're on the fence, but they have questions for you. So it has to be somebody that they can reach out to and contact within a short period of time, a day or two where they respond and actually have a conversation with. And that person is very, informative and promotes the opportunity and, is nice to deal with. That's going to be really, really important. And we've listed some places to post here. And these are just ideas and suggestions, definitely for any financial leadership roles or any financial roles. AFOA Canada is your number one. Your provincial, well, it's not number one, along with your provincial chapters and organizations, as well as the CPA chapters. So I would put them both hand in hand. But, some people are willing to relocate, so they might be looking at the Canadian AFO in Canada, but if they're in their province or regional, then, they're going to be accessing the chapters, AFOA chapters. Nation Talk, I think, is good. So that's for those that don't know, that's a daily newswire, Indigenous newswire that comes out, and they post a lot of jobs there. We also put down in Indeed and ZipRecruiter. I haven't had great luck with any of that, but we included them. And so the other thing I want to tell you from my experience is that people that are happy in their roles might leave for a better opportunity, something that would be a step up, or they see as a better opportunity or fit their lifestyle. But they're usually not looking at postings unless they're actually looking to leave and they're unhappy. So the best candidates you might be able to get through even a word of mouth or your network. So just keep that in mind. So we'll go on to interviewing your candidates. So first of all, I really think it's important that when someone applies, they take the time to apply, they write a covering letter, they give you their CV. And lots of people are tailoring their CVs to the specific role to make sure that they're listing the experience that's in the posting if they have it. You need to acknowledge and thank every single person that applies. And you're going, wow, that takes a lot of time. Well, yes, it does. But it's really based upon one of our 7 teachings, which is respect. If someone takes the time to do that, you need to acknowledge and thank them for the time that they did to do that. And I think that is important. We've always done that in our organization. So that's what sets us apart, as an Indigenous organization and Indigenous, communities or organization, is we can do things within the ways that we've been taught. I would recommend highly social media checks prior to scheduling the interview. So, and we gave you a link here. a couple of links that we can use that'll be very helpful to you. So you check their social media to see if there's anything that comes up that would be a red flag or concerning. You won't be surprised, I'm sure any of you, and I just got to get a glass of water here. You won't be surprised some of the things that people post on social media, you know, about their opinions and whatnot. So it could save you, you know, bringing in somebody or talking to somebody or hiring somebody that you really is not a fit for your organization. The questions for the interview should be based upon the skills, the knowledge, and the experience related to the job description. So that's where you get your questions from, is you get them from the job description and what's required. So, you know, stick to what's needed for the role. Definitely ask, you know, what First Nations or Indigenous organization employment experience they have or knowledge. And, you know, have they done any research on your organization or on your First Nations? It might be on their resume, you know, clearly if they've worked for another First Nations or an Indigenous organization, it'll be there. But sometimes it's not if they haven't, and maybe they'll have some kind of other experience, even on a volunteer basis. Someone should facilitate the interview process, you know, actually be the one to, let's say they organize the interviews, they send out the links, or if you have them in person, we might be getting back to that this year for sure. But lots of times with, you know, communities, rural communities, remote communities, it's going to be done, you know, virtually. So someone facilitate it. And when you start, the person should just provide roughly about a 2 to 3 minute overview of what they're looking for again, even though the person has the job description and they actually have the posting. So provide another overview and also describe the interview process, which goes something like this. You know, thank you for joining us. You're going to thank them for taking the time to apply and for actually meeting with us today. And the interview process is going to take roughly 45 minutes, or it's going to take an hour. And we're going to go through introductions right now. You know, we've got in there introductions. And then we're going to give you a time to actually, to ask 2 or 3 questions that you feel you'd like to ask. And then we'll go into, 7 interview questions. And then at the end, you'll get an opportunity to make, a closing statement or share anything else that you'd like to share with us. So that's how I started. And then just introduce everybody that's on the selection committee. So go around and introduce, everybody takes their turns introducing themselves. So you give the candidate an opportunity to ask 2 or 3 questions. This is actually a good part because it also shows you and demonstrates to you what has the candidate and the individual done to prepare for the interview. What research have they done? And based on their interview questions, are they strategic? Are they well thought out? Are there things that actually they should have known? I always hesitate if they start asking about salary or compensation or anything benefits at this point, because to me that, that's a flag that they're more interested in that than they are in the actual opportunity and the role. So selection committee, this is my thought, should ask open-ended questions. And it should actually be, instead of or behavioral questions, I say and behavioral questions. And here, hypothetical questions, when you're asking questions like, what have you done with this? What have you done with this? And without being, in depth, or what would you do? They're basically hypothetical, and they can answer in a way that, well, this is what I would do, but that's just, again, trying to please the interview panel or the group. I like to use behavioral questions, not 100%, but I will use probably 2/3. And we're taught in, university and courses that you take that past behavior is your best indication of future behavior in jobs. So this is always based on behavior questions are based on their past behavior. So it's tell us about a time when you had to deal with a conflict with, a staff member, and it was significant. Describe to us what the issue was without, without breaching confidentiality of who it was, but just describe to us the situation and the challenge and how you dealt with it. Please, if you can do that, that'd be great. And so they have to go back and think about a time. And if they say, well, what I would do, or this is what I like to do, you just, again, stop them and say, sorry, just want to clarify. If you could give an example of a situation that you've handled in the past, that would be really, really great for us. So take them back to tell us about a time when. And if they're managers or, they're senior and they're supervised staff, believe me, most of these questions they will have had experience doing. Okay. Same process for all the candidates and the same selection committee members for all interviews. If the selection committee is making a decision on the candidates, the final candidate or the final candidates, you need to have the same selection committee members to do that. You can't have someone, let's say they're interviewing 3 people, you're interviewing 3 candidates, and one of your selection committee members can only make 2 of the interviews. Well, first of all, it's a legal issue, legality, it's not legally correct, but most of all, I mean, it's really hard to determine if you're having a tough time making a decision, with the 3, and some want to go one way and some want to go the other. So it should be the same selection committee for all. And make sure that your selection committee is available for the times that you're doing that. So just clear that with them in advance, the selection committee. It really needs to be a good experience for the candidates. Even at senior levels, candidates do get stressed in interviews. It's a stressful situation. So you want to treat it in a good way again. And the other thing is your reputation is there as a good employer. So you want to attract future talent, both internally and externally, not just externally, the outside candidates, but internally as well. You want to treat people well. So it should be a good experience and try and make it as comfortable as possible for people. Okay. The employment offer, I'm just watching time here. Offer should be timely because, again, if we're in a huge talent shortage in Canada, and it's really bad. It's back to what it was in the 80s and 90s. We had talent shortages. 90s, the early 90s we did, but it's way worse right now. So you can't wait too long. You can't wait 2 or 3 weeks to be in touch with people. You want to try and do the interviews as close together as possible, not to lose any candidates, in the process, because, they could be, if they're coming to you and they're interviewing and applying for jobs, they might be applying for other jobs as well. So you can actually give an offer, but conditional upon completion of successful references and background checks. And I'm going to recommend that you always have your offer vetted by an employment or a labor lawyer, and not just a lawyer in general that doesn't specialize in this area, because it'll save you a lot of money if they specialize in employment or labor law, because they do this all the time. But you should have it vetted, especially at a senior level or management level. And when you make the offer, it should be included will be the job description. And in the offer, it says, we're offering you the role of the chief financial officer, attached job description. And, and here's what the benefits will be attached. Relocation assistance is up to this attached. And mention if there's housing, if it is applicable. And include the policy manual that the candidate will have to abide by. And that includes usually the HR policy as well. So any documents with all the details that are conditional or have the information that this individual needs to know for the role. So you have to be all inclusive in that. Background checks and references. At a senior level, again, remember, if the person doesn't work out, the cost of recruiting someone else. But if the individual doesn't work out and you have to terminate, down the road, this is really important, especially in financial areas or any of your management team. So I would say a minimum of 4 references, 6 would be better. And you don't want to have references of people that are friends or acquaintances of them. You want to have only individuals that have supervised their work in some capacity or individuals that they have actually worked with. But I would want at least 3 supervisors. And if they're at a senior level, management level, they will have 3 or 4 people for sure. The questions that you ask the references should be related to the job description on the experience, the skills, and the expertise. So again, getting that job description is really correct, current, and accurate is key, because that can establish your first year performance appraisal. And it's quick and easy to do once you get the job description done. It also becomes your interview guide questions. And it also becomes the questions for the references. Okay. Always do criminal record and financial checks. And that's conditional upon, successful completion. This is an organization that we use, and we're an executive search firm. And they're reasonable, they're good, they're fairly quick. So I'm sure if you have others and they're good, that's great. I'm just wanting to provide some resources for you. No backdoor checking. Okay, does anybody know what this is? I wish I had you in person here. So this is where, someone has applied and you're actually thinking that, oh, gee, they worked over at Squamish Nation. And you have a cousin or a buddy or a friend over at Squamish. So you're going to pick up the phone, you're going to call. And it's probably not the best idea. Well, actually, it's not a good idea at all, because people apply to your organization in confidence. So this is a privacy issue. And again, it's going to open you up for liabilities. If you breach the confidentiality and someone finds out through the grapevine, and the communities are small, even right across Canada at senior levels. People always know somebody else that knows somebody else, right? And let's say the employer finds out, if they're working and the employer finds out that this person is applying for a job, and for any reason that jeopardizes their role or their position, then your organization becomes liable. So you got to be really careful about doing any of this. Lots of times when we're doing search with the selection committee, could be a board of directors even. I'm really cautioning them about the confidentiality of who's applying, that this is all in confidence. There's legal implications. And we're not the ones that would be liable if the community or the organization, someone from there breaches that. So you got to be so careful about that. Okay, so onboarding and integration. Everybody should be doing this because this helps the candidate becomes successful. They need help, they need support. And most organizations have been doing this now for probably about 8 or 9 years. So the average senior manager or leader, CFO, executive director, CEO, takes 6.2 months to transition into their role and give back more than they're learning, from being in the role. And that's based upon the first 90 days, which is in the resources of the slides here, which you'll have access to. And that's a Harvard review book that's based on 5 years of study. So with help and support, the average person takes 6.2 months to successfully transition and make a meaningful contribution. So you have to give the person time and support to transition into the role. It can take a little less time if it's an internal candidate, but it still takes time because it's a new role. So you need to provide a written orientation, integration plan to support your new leader. And, if you read the first 90 days, it has some great ideas for that. But if it's a First Nations, it should be things like, or an Indigenous organization in an urban community, basic history of the organization or community, list of the people and titles that they're going to be supervising, how often the different departments or portfolios that they're going to be overseeing or within the organization meet, a strategic plan or strategic objectives, the vision, the mission, the mandate. And, that's really important to put it in writing and give them documents even ahead of time. Once they've accepted the role, you can give them this document and the documents, because and you can get them to sign a confidentiality agreement, but, they're your new person. So that should be understood, but I always check that. Don't assume anything. So once they start, regular communications and check-ins for support. And this should be done probably 2 to 3 times a week for the first 2 to 3 months. Sounds like a lot, but you're meeting with them a couple times a week for an hour. What do you need? What kinds of supports? What help do you need? How is it going? And getting feedback from them. This is something that I share with a lot of our clients over the last 10 years, is you need to let them know the culture of the organization. I'm not talking First Nations culture, Indigenous culture, nothing like that. The actual culture of the organization, because every organization has its own internal culture that is not in your policy and procedure manual. But people that work there and people that are employees and staff know we don't do it this way, or it's not in a policy procedure manual, but here, this person or that person, this is how you deal with them. So certain things that happen in that organization is part of the culture. And also landmines. And what do I talk when I'm talking landmines? Let them know some of the areas that are going to be challenging. Lots of times people will say, well, we don't want to tell them that ahead of time. We want them to come in and make their own decisions and actually assess that on their own. That is wrong to do that, because if there's been problems in the past, there's probably problems that they're going to face in the future. So if there's any specific challenging employees or challenging area that they need to be aware of, just do it in a good way. Share the information and say, you might want to just be aware that, that this is going on, in this department, and we've had some challenges in the past. And if anything happens, we're here to help you or support you or give you information that you need. Don't let them find out on their own, because that's going to really discourage them. And they're going to feel like they were set up, for failure right from the get-go. Excuse me. Excuse me. So in a community, again, what's worked really well in the past is assigning a respected statesperson or elder from the community. This could also work well in a provincial organization, like let's say the Provincial Association for Friendship Centers. So, and especially if they're coming from another region or another province or another First Nations, get a highly regarded statesperson or an elder that, you know, has the history and the traditions and culture of the First Nations and community to actually be a mentor to them or a resource when they need to about the community or the organization in general. Retention and success. So a leader usually will decide, or any employee, it's not just managers or leaders, will decide in their first 4 months if they're going to stay or if they're going to start looking for a job again. So, you know, is the job what you said it's going to be? If you painted a great picture or it was vague and they come in and they've got nothing but problems, they're probably going to leave. So you're saying, well, what happens if we do have problems or if there is a, situation? It's probably best to let them know that there are some challenges. You don't have to tell, paint it maybe as bad as it is with details. But in general, you should give them that, that information. We place people into challenging situations and turnarounds quite often. So we need to know if it is going to be a challenge or a situation where, there's, that they have to address right away. And there's certain people that are really good at turnarounds. They're good at turnarounds. They're good at startups. Those are the same type of people. And other than, they're different kind of skill set than the people that come in and just maintain a status quo. So it's important to actually know that. And if, you're getting an individual that can do that. Supporting them, treating them with honesty and respect, make them feel comfortable, part of the community, so that, they can transition into the community or organization, them and their family. You also, for retention and success, you really need good HR policies with sharing information that they need to know. In the webinar that I was in with the senior talent people, chief human resources officer and senior people, one of the things that came into play, and I can tell you this, even in the last couple of years in the chamber with the talent shortage, is two things are front and center now with everything going on with, George Floyd and Joyce Seshaquan, is they want a respectful workplace, and it's going to be transparent more than ever before because of social media and because of, what can be shared and filmed. So that is key. So respectful workplace and a flexible work environment. And when I say flexible, it doesn't mean that people work from home all the time, but it could be a hybrid, or it could be instead of, 7 hours a day in the office, they could have some flexibility in terms of the time that they start. They can start, as early as 8 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock, and leave, accordingly at the end of the day, or they could start at 9 or 9:30, because remember, we also have elder care. We have in our community, we have a higher rate of children and younger community members. So chances are employees have young children, and they could even be sandwiched between, caring for their children and their elders. So flexibility is key if you're going to keep people and even attract people. That's especially after COVID now. That's something you gotta be checking into. Succession planning is definitely a solution. With everything, we look at 7 generations in advance. You can't do succession planning 7 generations in advance, but we've got to look at how we're going to be getting our people in talent, and more advanced roles. So look at your organization or your community. Who are your future EDs and directors of finance or CFOs. Do an inventory of the talent that's available in the community or organization. Do a gap analysis. Okay, so here's what we have, and here's the areas that we need. Then develop training and development plans for each of those people. For a CFO, director of finance, or executive director, you should be looking at several people, because it takes years sometimes to develop them, train and mentor them. And it's okay to have more than one person that you're succession planning for that potential role. Just did a search for Ktunaxa Nation in Cranbrook, and the Ktunaxa Nation Council, which is 4 communities, I believe, 4 to 5 communities. They had some really great people that were from their community, but not living in their community. And so we worked at doing, like, I didn't personally do it, but I helped with the plan to plan it. Who internally potentially could take on that CEO type role, executive director role, who externally could be, and trying to attract them to even look at it and apply. But you need an inventory of potential upcoming talent and a plan to support them and train them. And, consider providing mentorship from retiring staff or individuals to train for the future. And also, one of the things you can do is consider hiring your accounting students and graduates, and then helping them to, complete and achieve their CPA, if you have any of those, and take the time and the effort to do that and invest in it. And also for your accounting and other managers, maybe they don't want to be at the designation of a CPA, but AFOA has some unbelievable training for accounting, for human resources, for administrators that they offer, and so that's key. So this takes time, but with the succession planning, I would say that the ideal is to get internal people or people from the community, but internal people, because you're going to retain them if they're on a training and development plan. And the younger generation, the millennials, that's key to them, that they're given that's one of their retentions or a benefit to them. They want to be trained, they want to be developed, they don't want to be in a job forever that they get bored at. They want to be, challenged. So this is a retention for you as well. So you're not having a revolving door of people coming and going. And I think that we're almost done, but I can't see questions, but I think Spencer can, if you want to type any of your questions that you have, and then he can read them out. But before we do that, while you're typing, here you'll have access to the slides. So recruitment and retention resources, there's CPA Canada, is actually talks about the shortage of labor, and specifically when it comes to accounting and finance, that's even like really at the top of the list, so it's even tougher. BDC in general talks about the labor shortage. These are fairly new research documents. This isn't old stuff. The first 90 days, if you want to read that about how important the integration onboarding plan is to set people up for success and make sure that they get into the job as quickly as possible, remembering it takes 6.2 months to transition. You've got HR training from AFOA Canada, as well as accounting and administration training as well. Here's some job description templates. And here's the background check for criminal record. And you need to check education and financial solvency, that they're not currently in bankrupt. And I'd be very concerned if you have a director of finance, controller, or CFO that's ever been bankrupt. And I think that's it. So I just want to say thank you very much. And Spencer, over to you if anybody has any questions.
Thank you so much, Brenda, for presenting today. I think everyone gained something valuable. So we have one question from Anant. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. It says, hiring in-house or using experts, what are the pros and cons? And then also follow-up experts mean consulting firms.
Okay, great question. I like that question. I just want you to know that I'm transitioning from leaders, and I'll be going, I'll be leaving them at the end of April after being with them for quite a while. And this is totally objective. So it's always best to hire in-house, always, because they have the culture of the organization. Remember, that culture piece is so important. So they have the culture, and if they're a good employee, you want to hire internally if you can. That's why succession planning. And if you know that their attitude is great, they're a hard worker, they've, this is a person that's dedicated, you might be willing to do training and development when they're not quite there yet. If they're not quite there yet, and it's a specific role that needs a lot of expertise or technical expertise, you might have to hire from outside. And if you can do a contract till this person's ready, that might be good too. But, so I would say anytime you can hire internally, and I always told my clients that that's number one. If you've got good people, hire them and train and mentor them. Okay.
So if anyone has any more questions, just type them in the chat. This is our Q&A period.
Yeah, I think we have a few minutes.
We still have a few minutes left. Yep.
Yeah.
The person who asked the question says thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'll just ask you a question, but I was really surprised with the backdoor sort of description that you gave, because our community is very small, right? And to begin with, and then of course the Indigenous professional community is even smaller. So we all kind of know each other, right? And I'm kind of glad that you outlined, because they never gave me something to think about, which is how you're gaining sort of additional information, right? And the implications, I guess, of that. I thought that was quite something.
Yeah, and it can be a problem. It could cost your organization a lot of money, because if for any reason it jeopardizes that individual's current role, you could be liable at a senior level for a year to 2 years of their pay. It's a lot.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Okay. Well, okay, go ahead.
Oh, well, yeah. So this is last call for questions. If not, we can end a little bit earlier. Does anybody have any final questions?
And then also, if you do have questions, you can contact me. And I'm on LinkedIn, and my email is brenda@leadersinternational.com. I'm here till the end of April. Or reach out to AFOA to and just give them your questions, and I'll I don't mind answering them in some way, shape, or form that we're able to. I can get back to AFOA and they can share the answers with you. Okay.
Oh, Vicky Lee says, thank you for this presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you, Vicky. Great. Okay, everybody, have a really good rest of your day. And it's been a lot of fun, and AFOA is a great organization, and I'm happy to do this today. So enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bamapi, everyone.